everyone. First, thanks to the organizers for the invitation. I've been to a few SMC workshops. It's great, and it's always a good time to see as a field is evolving. And again, thanks for giving me the opportunity to present these works. That are two of them with colleagues and students. Okay, first, just a call for applications for both PhD and postdocs. Thanks to NERC funding we received last year with these friends. There are positions open in Paris, of course, but also in Warwick. I think in Berkeley it's harder to find positions. So the first part of the talk is a joint work with the PhD student at Warwick, Arthur Hector, and Andy, Marie, and Gareth on the adaptive version of their Restore algorithm. And it has been recently accepted in Berlin. So the notion is one related to regeneration, which is something I worked on quite a while ago on using renewal of Markov chains to provide an easier assessment of the convergence, and sometimes to produce more efficient algorithms. It's linked to this trend of giving away reversibility to achieve higher efficiency that started a while ago, but more recently with this PDMP methods for partially deterministic Markov processes that give away reversibility, which is an easier way to attain stationarity, but explore more efficiently the target distribution. And one of the leading papers is the one by Alex Bouchakos and Ocourses in JASA that I will mention again. So regeneration is an idea that whatever the Markov chain is doing stops, and it restarts according to a certain process, which again, for some examination of the properties of the chain is a big plus, because then you get IAD path that are repeated rather than a Markov process. However, regeneration is also a big nightmare in practical sense, because the regeneration times are more dispersed for higher dimensions, but for also most targets, and they are not necessarily easy to achieve. Which is why in the 90s this idea sort of went into sleep, because there was no practical advantage of using such techniques. And so these PDMPs are sort of taking over at least certain area against reversible MCMC methods such as the NUTS and Hamiltonian algorithm. And we started as usual by borrowing from physics with the works of Kraft et al. Like Manon Michel and others on exploiting this exploration inspired by physics motivations. And then progressively some more technical aspects came out by proving the convergence and higher convergence properties of the algorithm. So for instance, geometric ergodicity was proved by Villaginidis et al. A few years ago. So the notion of PDMP is in a sense very schematic by having a deterministic part where a certain process evolves with no stochastic intervention, for instance, using an ODE. Then at some time, this evolution stops. Then the process restarts according to a certain transition. And if these three species are put together in a way that preserves the target, then you get a new algorithm. So the quantities phi, lambda, and possibly q are all connected together and connected with the target. Now, the implementation is not as schematic and nice as in the previous slide, and the difficulties come from implementing the OD implementation, which is somehow accessible, available in most situations. And for me, the hardest part is to create the splits because, well, the function lambda is usually available as an integral. So there are techniques to go around, but they imply assumptions on the target or on the other branches. And so, for instance, this superposition or fitting ID, which is found in the paper by Alex and Corses, is essentially a form of bounding, just as in Axel project, where you have to find an upper bound on the quantity alpha that drives the stopping time. And so this implies, of course, conditions on the target pi, for instance. Superposition is just a decomposition of the probability row into a product of terms. So this is like a secondary trick, but not as efficient as the second one. So what is restore? Right, it's a method that came out of Andy's thesis a few years ago, namely that, well, following this PDMP process, you follow a diffusion YT, and then at times that are random, you jump and restart the diffusion with another value. And the times for regeneration, the time where the process stops and jump to another value, are driven by this function kappa that would be central to this stop. So the restore process is just following the diffusion on the time interval and then moving to another one according to the condition at these regeneration times, tau I. So this is a picture in a toy example of a brain process that is broken at this regeneration time. It jumps from the red dot at the end of the current brain process to the green dot to restart. And as you can see, the jumps can be major, and the duration of the different paths are quite varying. And so again, if you put the right conditions on these different elements of the process, you do achieve the intended goal, namely that the process is stationary against the target of interest, say pi, by default. And again, this the central choice is the one of regeneration rate that governs the stopping times. where you can spot again the target moved by this object of the generator y and y cross the adjoint of Ly or Lx, sorry, and there is this additional C mu over pi, mu being the regeneration measure, the one that drives the generations of these green dots. And so if you have such version of the rejection rate kappa, you do achieve stationarity against power. And so this equation will appear several times on this part of the talk, namely that there is a part that is essential to achieve the stationarity, which is the first one is only driven by pi and the dynamics of the process. And then the second part involves a C mu over pi, which is a nuisance component of this kappa, but nonetheless unavoidable in the representation, in particular because kappa tilde, the first part, is not necessarily positive. And so C must be large enough for the sum to be positive, which also involves some constraint on the connection between mu and pi. Again, a little bit as in active project where you must have fat enough tails for your proposal mechanism. So probably if you have all these objects and these conditions that are fulfilled, then you do end up with a sampler that can be managed at least in some situation. So it converges in the usual sense. You can derive a CLT under further conditions. Well, you have the convergence of the ergodic averages, which is the central purpose of finding this algorithm. But of course, the properties will depend on the choice of the generation measured mu, with one measure being somehow the ideal measure, the one that achieves for kappa to be couching zero. That is, you choose C mu as small as possible so that kappa plus is at zero, which means that, I mean, from time to time it is zero, which is more of a plus thing because then you don't get regeneration. And so this mu plus is a form of ideal, but of course in practice it is a complicated thing to determine and find. And so the point of this more recent work is to find an approximation to this mu plus. As a side remark, and this is not a big surprise, but in such situations, whether or not the target pi is known completely or up to a constant doesn't matter so much, because the constant, well, doesn't impact the construction of the algorithm, which only depends on the energy mu. But furthermore, this constant can be approximated as a side product of the algorithm, namely that the regeneration time eventually lead to a simple estimator of Z. And the reason is that the pair, the product CZ, or the pair C and Z, are somehow undistinguishable in the kappa. You can see here, it only depends on C times Z. And because C tilde, this product is set by the user, is a free quantity, you do end up having an estimator of Z that relates to the average inter-regeneration time, or the total number, the total time divided by the number of regeneration. So the work tried to push that towards the convergence of an approximation to this mu plus in borrowing from very massively from this paper from Benaim and courses to achieve the convergence, and as opposed to regular MCMC where adaptive versions are somehow harder to handle because of the Markov mechanics. Here, because of the regeneration, these cuts produce much faster, well, not faster, much easier assessment of the convergence, which is, well, it's not a surprise, I'm sure, for the surgeons, because it's the same thing for a lot of SMC results. So the connection is that we'll produce a sequence of mu t's, which are the temporary approximation to mu plus, by adding to the original choice mu naught, that may be arbitrary, provided it leads to a positive kappa, by creating a very simple empirical approximation of mu plus, adding point masses at points visited by the chain, which in practice means that the more we go, the more restarting points there are that are connected to the target pi rather than mu naught. And so this shape, which is mindful of a Dirichlet process update, is not very nice in terms of having a new distribution, because it has a lot of these point masses. But actually, for the purpose of the algorithm, it's simply there to move regenerations from this mu naught that has not necessarily any nice connection with either pi or mu plus, and to restart from all the values that are of interest for the eventual target. And so, once we have this restarting point, we just apply restore at each after each regeneration by just updating this mu t. So I mean, the algorithm fits in a slide. That's the only appeal of the slide. And what it does is that originally it starts from a mu naught that is, for instance, a normal with large variance here. And I mean, the picture is, well, visually almost the same as before. There are big jumps, and well, the sequences are of different lengths. However, it starts concentrating better on the region of interest as the time proceeds. And that's not much we can say about this further. Now, of course, there are a lot of things to be chosen. First, mu naught, which can be, well, decided either as a normal or whatever distribution, or can be constructed from an early simulation by other MCMC algorithms. And then there are other parameters to be chosen that, of course, impact well, the times between regeneration, for instance. But overall, it's not impossible to calibrate them. I'm not trying to down sell this method. Eventually, we do approach this mu plus in a reasonable time, at least for the example we considered. it doesn't seem impacted so much by the dimension. It's not necessarily faster than random walk. Metropolis random walk doesn't exist, not a new algorithm. And well, thanks to this non-reversible aspect of the method, it's a better tool for exploring peaked and skewed tails of the target. Okay, so these are the first part. The second part is about something completely different, which is a work we've done with Charlie Andral, Randall Duke, and Hugo is here, and we'll also present a poster on that on Wednesday. And so the idea is someone that's connected with things we have played with Randall in the past, which is to consider different version of metropolis testing algorithms in terms of different kernel. So we had this so-called vanilla route optimization papers a few years ago, where actually we were considering the target of the accepted part of the Markov chain, which create a new Markov chain in a way to improve estimators, if not convergence. Here, the idea is it's another version of this reassessment of the original metropolis testing algorithm, or something slightly more general. So the picture is one of MCMC algorithm, namely that you have a Markov chain that exploits an original kernel Q that is actually targeting another distribution pi tilde. And with a correction that is, for instance, a metropolis testing correction, you do redraft the wrong target and create another Markov chain that has the right target. So this is simply the sequence of proposals from the original kernel, which is arbitrary, and the sequence of accepted value that are converging to the stationary distribution part. So that's what we call a rejection Markov chain algorithm. But that's essentially the same as usual. And so if we look at it in that perspective for the accepted value XRs, it has a kernel representation S that writes this way. And if there is this funny sum from 1 to infinity, it's because we don't know how many steps to make before the next acceptance. And so as a general representation, as long as rho is not 1, this is a possibility. And as soon as rho is 1, the infinite sum actually stops. So it doesn't mean that the algorithm takes an infinite time to implement. It's just this representation of the kernel that works for us. We had the same type of representation with vanilla route optimization, but again, it was implementable in real time for real people. And so it has there's an equation that it is of interest for later that says that SH, the transformation of H by S, is this fixed quantity plus another transformation by Q of SH, rho being the acceptance probability again. And so if we look at S directly, and if Q is a kernel with a stationary distribution, which excludes, say, transient kernels. Then S, the modification by rho, the whole point of the algorithm, of course, is rho pi tilde invariant, and therefore, if you take a rho that corrects for choice of pi tilde towards pi, S is indeed pi invariant. That's a simple proof. M, while being here, just a constant that makes the ratio less than 1. So pi tilde must dominate pi in that sense. It's a bit like rejection. And now, rather than using rejection, we move to an important approach, which is that at each iteration, rather than generating 1 or 0 points, we generate several, well, 0, 1 or more from the current X tilde, the current proposal from Q. And so the motivations for following this path is that first, I mean, this frees us from picking a Q such that its pi tilde dominates pi, which is a strong constraint, particularly in complex situations where you don't control rho. And so instead, we can take rho to be anything between 0 and infinity as a ratio of pi over pi tilde, which, well, again, is remindful of works from the early 2000s by Liang and courses that replaced interpolated testing ratios with random quantities, which had these same features, that there was a free parameter in the expectation. So the expectation was defined up to a normalizing constant, except it was not a normalizing constant. So this ratio rho will determine the number of repetition we see at each proposal X tilde. Again, following this cartoon, namely that if we accept a value, we repeat it ni tilde times with a distribution which is such that its expectation is rho. So there is a free choice of R, the distribution of n, and actually, even though it's free, the choice we'll make, and that has justifications, is just to take this random quantity that is reminding us of stratified sampling, namely that you take the absolute, the integer part of rho, and then add or not an extra boundary time, in the fractional part of rho. So that's random, but hardly random. It's just one value plus 1 or 0. So as I said, this is connected with works of the early 2000s. Particularly, I think of this work by Liu, Liang, and Wang, where what they call dynamic weighting Monte Carlo had the only constraint that the random weight at expectation, well, in that formulation, pi up to a constant. And then another paper that get very much noticed, but is quite connected to us, is to replace a Markov chain algorithm with a semi-Markov chain algorithm by allowing repetition in the constraint. So you have an extra loop rather than having a Markov chain. You have an extra loop at each time. And so the algorithm is that follows is again based on the choice of Q, the original kernel, and a distribution on the number of repetitions. And well, to formalize it, it's a Markov chain, but by following the pair X and N, namely that as long as N is not 0, we keep moving N to N minus 1, keeping the same value for XL, so repeating the same value for XL. And it's only when we have exhausted N that we repeat. It's very formal. It just means that we repeat X tilde N times, unless, well, N is 0. Actually, this formalization helps with the theoretical analysis of the algorithm. And so, again, the best way to look at it, in continuation of my previous remark, is to look at the joint chain Xi, Ni, even though Ni is just there for completing the Markov representation. And from there, we have another kernel that appears by adding the N that writes this way as P. And well, you recover the original one S when N is equal to 0. So the quantities are essentially the same. R is linked with an R tilde that normalizes this R tilde. Okay, so well, again, unsurprisingly, the thing is constructed so that if the expectation under R is rho, then rho being constructed to target pi, the marginal distribution of this measure is again pi. So this is exactly doing what we want. And if pi tilde is the stationary for Q, so if Q allows for a stationary measure pi tilde, then this kernel has invariant distribution that is this pi bar written on top. And so thanks to this construction, we have well, the essential conversion probability for a Monte Carlo algorithm, namely a strong law of large numbers on the extended chain. Under further conditions, we do have a central limit theorem with a variance decomposition that involves two subvariances, that is rho tilde and rho hat. Rho tilde is the original variance of the kernel Q itself, and rho hat involves the variance of N on average. So there is an extra variance term that comes from picking this N as random compared with a, well, deterministic. And so, of course, there is a choice to be made for R, and not only the original choice was simple and natural, but also it does achieve the minimum variance. So both aspects are meeting here, because, well, again, the only variability in N is this Bernoulli at the end. Sorry for the notation. S here just means Bernoulli. It's not connected to the previous kernel. Now, this can be extended to pseudo-marginal situation rather straightforwardly if there is an unbiased estimator of pi, then well, the same algorithm applies, replacing pi with pi tilde, and the argument is straightforward. It's just an extension of the space with a random variable pi tilde and pi hat, sorry. And then if pi tilde is also known, even pi tilde could be replaced with an unbiased estimator. Of course, as usual with the marginal, this replacement, while fantastic because it allows to tackle more complex situations, does involve more variability because well more. How much you have? Like
Maybe 5 minutes max in total.
almost finished. So in practice, we have to make choices. Q, which somehow induces pi tilde, and kappa. Kappa is somewhat arbitrary, but it connects with the length of the chain. And so what we chose in the paper was to try to tune kappa. And well, the tuning was trying to fit the ESS of the actual chain and the one from an ideal importance sampling where rho would be used. I mean, this is a practical choice, but there is this warning that we need to mention, namely that, well, we look at ESS as this ideal equivalent of an IID sample size, and we just don't account for the fact that the Markov chain may be yet converging to the target. So that's really a practical thing. And so this is an illustration of how the choice of kappa does impact the ESS and the length of the resulting Markov chain. So for a while, there is this increase of the ESS, and then after it reaches a plateau, which is a good time to stop. Simulation, not my time. And it's almost over. Now another example is this one where we create this this multimodal target in arbitrary dimension D, and actually the Q. I'm going to mention anything because the Q is constructed by hand through a normalizing flow, which is we train a normalizing flow T to achieve this pi tilde, which well, follows a recent paper by Marie-Lou Gabry and co-authors. And the comparison with Metropolis and the method of Sahu and Zyglersky is that we do achieve a higher ESS in that example in a sort of consistent way as the dimension increases. So, well, instead, I mean that's a bit of a toy problem to consider this importance Monte Carlo, Markov chain Monte Carlo version, but it's a refinement on the existing that to us is of interest, and well, thanks to this construct, for instance, through normalizing flows, opens a rather large field of possible extension. And that's it. Thank you.
Any questions? We have maybe time for one question.